Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm reviewing the Under Armour Project Rock 5. So 3 pros that I have with the Project Rock 5 is number 1, honestly, I think this is probably the strongest performing Project Rock shoe to date. And so when lifting heavy, when doing explosive work, when doing more versatile training, where you're doing some sprints, you're blending in some lifting and some plyometric movements, this model has performed pretty well. You get a nice level of reactivity from this hover midsole, and as a whole, the shoe feels really good in those contexts. Compared to the first 4 iterations, honestly, this is the first Project Rock shoe where I was like, damn, like I actually really like how this feels for these different training verticals. So when deadlifting up to 495 pounds, the stability in the shoe was fine. And then when doing more plyometrics, I like the overall reactivity you get from the hover midsole. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that it looks like Under Armour reworked some of the construction features from the Project Rock 4 that led to long-term durability issues. So in the Project Rock 4, 2 areas that often led to issues with durability was number 1, this midfoot TPU clip. It would break down the laces and the laces were thin. And then back here on the cup, back here, we had a TPU layer, and that would cut into the material of this shoe. In the Project Rock 5, we now have 2 eyelets up here at the top that feel a little bit more durable in nature, even though it is still that TPU layer. It seems like Under Armour put some tech in here to kind of prevent the early breakdown and fraying of the laces, plus the laces are a little thicker in this model. Plus back here around the heel into the midfoot, this TPU layer now wraps and extends. So there's no areas where I think you're gonna have a ton of breakdown from that material rubbing and having a little bit of friction over long-term use. The third pro that I have with this model is I like that they reworked the sole of this shoe. So we have the tri-base tech still on the outsole of this model, but a big difference is that in the Project Rock 4, this was all a solid base. So this was all pretty thick, it was pretty chunky, and it was pretty hard to articulate the shoe. In the Project Rock 5, while it is still thick and while it still doesn't articulate the best compared to other models, it does give you a little bit more midfoot movement because we do have a break of material here at the midfoot. So I like this feature. I wasn't sure how I was going to enjoy it because out of the box, these are really stiff, and honestly they are a much stiffer and more stable training shoe in regard to the thickness of their sole construction, but I like this because it does give this model a slight edge for more versatile training and giving the shoe a slightly more athletic fit and feel when it comes to performance. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with the Project Rock 5. So 3 cons that I have with the Under Armour Project Rock 5 is number 1, if you are somebody who likes a lot of articulation in your shoes and you want less stack height in your training shoes, the Project Rock 5 will likely not resonate with you. Now, I just mentioned in my pros that this model does have more articulation than the other 4 Project Rock models, but that is relatively speaking. So if you do want less material separating your foot from the floor with your training shoes, this model will likely not be a good pick for you. The second con that I have with this model, and this might just be me, but in some of my exercises, I felt very forward in this shoe. So this model has an 8mm heel toe drop. That's fairly high for training shoes. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be forward with your movement patterning. But with this model, for like kettlebell swings, I kept coming up on the toes, and I think because with this thicker sole here and with the toe spring, it was a little bit difficult, I think, to ground the foot and really sink into those hips during the eccentric loading patterning of that exercise. So now when you're training and when you're going forward and when you're moving laterally and backwards, it's not the biggest deal because you're propelling yourself in all of these directions. However, if you are being more static with your movements and you're trying to do like a kettlebell swing, you might feel a little bit forward in this model, and I think that's likely due to the toe spring and the sole construction of this shoe. My third con with this model is the upper security is interesting in this shoe. And now, I'm not sure that this con is going to affect everybody, so please take this with a grain of salt. However, when wearing this model more loose, I found myself sliding into the toe box of the shoe. So I cranked the laces tighter, and that helped that issue, and I wasn't sliding anymore. However, what ends up happening is you end up getting a little bit of overlap down here at the bottom of the forefoot, so with these 2 eyelets down here, not the biggest deal, but I do worry that if you have like a narrow foot, for example, and you have to really crank the laces tight on the shoe, that could be an issue that really bothers you with this model. So just some food for thought with the upper security of this Project Rock 5 shoe. I don't think it's going to affect every foot anatomy. However, I do worry for more narrow feet or even feet that have a very low arch where you're going to have a bit more volume up here. If you have to crank these laces tight, I'm not sure how this is going to feel for you long term. My fourth con with this model is that we don't have a removable insole, and we do have a lower volume through the forefoot upper in this shoe. So if you have thicker custom orthotics and inserts, this model is not going to be the best pick for you. You're going to feel very limited with this model's upper, so I would say look look into other training shoes. And then also just as like an added con that just like is like why the laces run a little bit long in the shoe. I had this fully tightened and double knotted, and as you can see, like the laces are pretty long. So overall, I think the laces could be shortened a little bit in this shoe and it would make it a little bit better and like not have your laces like flopping and hanging over. But those are my cons. Now let's talk about performance of the Project Rock 5. When it comes to the performance of the Under Armour Project Rock 5, I'm going to break this section into a few different parts. I'm going to talk about lifting, versatile training, shorter runs, and then daily wear. In the context of lifting, the Project Rock 5 did a pretty good job. So I think if you're much more recreational in nature with your strength work on a weekly basis, and you want a shoe that can be stable enough for barbell training, machine work, and accessory exercises, the Project Rock 5 will do a pretty good job. The upper midsole doesn't compress a ton, and once again, like when working up to 495 pounds in deadlifts, I didn't have huge major compression issues. Granted, I don't like the stack height in this model for that context, but when it comes to like a pure stability standpoint, the midsole does a pretty good job at not compressing a ton, even though it is thicker in nature. Also, I do like the rubber outsole in the shoe. You get a nice level of tread, so if you're working out on turf, rubber gym floors, or wooden platforms, whatever it might be, I don't think you're gonna have an issue with traction or grip in the shoe. And with the increased level of articulation in the forefoot of the shoe, I like this model a lot better than the Project Rock 4 for things like lunges and stuff where you're gonna be a little bit more dynamic in nature. So for cleans and whatnot, it was a lot easier to get up on the toes in this shoe. When it comes to versatile training, this model was pretty good for the most part. And so with like multi-directional exercises and plyometrics, you get a nice level of pop and spring out of this hover midsole. Once again, it is stable enough to give you a nice level of ground feedback despite being a thicker shoe. So I don't think you're gonna lose out on power due to it compressing a ton. Also, I do like the tri-base outsole tech in the shoe and how it's blended here with this cut in the midfoot. I think it gives this shoe a slight edge for giving you a little bit more articulation once again for multi-directional exercises. And once you get the laces tight enough in the shoe, I do like the upper security. I never felt like I was spilling over the sole of the shoe. So I think once you really get that tightness that works well for you in the Project Rock 5, the security should be on point. My only gripe with this model for more versatile training is once again, I think you can feel a little bit forward in the shoe and it can feel a little bit thick and clunky at times just because this heel is pretty dang blocky. When it comes to shorter runs, this model will work for distances from like 1 to 2, maybe 3 miles. So if you want to tack on a couple of miles pre or post workout as a cool down, as a warm up, this shoe should do a pretty good job. And for sprints, this model is also okay. Like this would not be my dedicated sprinting shoe, but if I'm adding a few sprints into like an athletic style training session, I found this model to be fine and give you enough responsiveness to not make them overly uncomfortable despite being a thicker and heavier shoe. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe is okay. Honestly, like I'm hit or miss on if I would wear these on a daily wear basis because with the upper construction, I do have to tighten them a little bit to not feel like I'm sliding around due to this knit booty construction. So that is something to think about, especially for folks out there with narrow feet. This may not be the most comfortable model to wear on a daily wear basis because if you have to crank the laces super tight to create a nice level of security in the shoe, that's likely not going to feel the best long term. Also, the shoe is pretty heavy and it can feel a little bit stiff at times. So if you do like a shoe that's a little bit more articulative or gives you a wider toe box, this model might not be the best for daily wear. So when it comes to price of the Under Armour Project Rock 5, you can expect to pay $150 USD. This price point is similar to prior Project Rock iterations, so there has been no increase or decrease for the Project Rock 5's price. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should invest in the Under Armour Project Rock 5? So I think if you like the Project Rock shoe line, and if you like the Rock and what he's about, then I think the 5 could be worth investing in. My favorite Project Rock model to date has been the 2. The 5 honestly is rivaling the performance of the 2 in regard to being my favorite. So if you resonated with the 2 and you like that model, I think you'll like the 5 because honestly the 4 was kind of meh, the 3 was a total miss for me. So if you're similar with your thinking on the Project Rock shoe line, I think that could definitely warrant looking into this shoe. Now, that being said, if you're not necessarily sold on the Rock shoe line, and if you don't really care about the branding and the messaging of it, you could find better training shoes for more general strength work and more general training out there for less than $150 USD, or even models that have a similar price point that I think outperform the shoe for lifting, versatile training, etc. So while I do think the price point could be worth it for Project Rock fans, I think if you're more general with your training, I would say pass on this shoe because you could find models with a slightly lower price point. When it comes to the sizing and fit of the Under Armour Project Rock 5, I think most lifters and athletes should be safe going true to size in this model. The length fits true, and the width is what I would describe as neutral. On Under Armour's site, they list the width as regular. Now that being said, If you have custom orthotics or inserts, I would say probably pass on the shoe. I think you're going to feel a little bit limited once again with the upper volume in this model. And if you have narrow feet, you may also want to pass on the shoe due to the upper security issue I talked about in my cons. Those are two populations that I don't think will resonate with this model. And if you've ever worn the Project Rock 4, size the 5 the same. They are very similar with their overall last construction and fit and sizing. When it comes to the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the Project Rock 5, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 14.45 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 8 millimeters. And once again, this model does not feature a removable insole. All right, so now let's go over the construction of the Under Armour Project Rock 5. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up, and then surrounding the toe box here, we have a mesh upper. So with this mesh upper, it feels a little bit more rigid and it has like a rubbery feel to it compared to the Project Rock 4, which had like a more loose and I would say lower quality feeling mesh upper to it. Looking at the midfoot, we have some synthetic overlays that then transition into this TPU wrap that goes from the midfoot here with these two eyelets back into the heel. I think this will be a better thing long-term for durability of the shoe. Now we do have a knit booty style construction once again, and that can cause some rub with this TPU, so definitely keep an eye on that. I'm curious to see how this shoe fares for longer periods of time with more folks wearing it when it comes to the durability of this construction change. Looking at the midfoot, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 core eyelets that go up. Once again, the two eyelets at the top here have this TPU layer here. It almost feels similar to like the Hover Rise models and the Apex models that have used a similar lacing structure back here around the boot and the two top eyelets. Looking at the tongue construction, we have a breathable mesh tongue. The tongue itself has like this foamy material to it. Honestly, I'm not super sold that I like this component of it. I think if they had reworked this tongue or even given it a slightly better gusseting, I think that would have actually helped the upper security issue that I talked about in this model. We also have a tongue loop here and an external heel tab to help pull the shoe on because once again, it is a slightly more booty style construction shoe compared to more traditional lacing systems. Looking at the heel back here, we have some Under Armour branding here, some Project Rock branding, blood, sweat, and respect back here on the heel. And once again, we do have that TPU wrap, which gives you a nice cut back here and counter into the heel. Looking at the midsole construction, we have a hover midsole throughout. I mentioned this earlier, but we do have a cut in this shoe. It gives it a little bit more articulation compared to prior Project Rock models. And then looking at the outsole, we have a full rubber outsole tread. It varies a little bit, so it's a little bit more rigid back here on the heel and forefoot. We have some grooves up here in the forefoot for mobility, and then we have that tri-base tech right here in the midfoot. Looking at the heel too, it is a slightly more beveled heel, so I do like that for transitioning into running and whatnot and jumping movements because it doesn't make the heel as blocky even though it is pretty thick. So that does kind of help out the blockiness of this heel, which I mentioned earlier. And we don't have a removable insole in this shoe. So once again, there is nothing to take out in this shoe. So if you have custom orthotics or inserts, this may not be the best model for you. If you have additional questions on the Under Armour Project Rock 5, drop a comment down below. Alright guys, that wraps up my review of the Under Armour Project Rock 5. Overall, I've enjoyed the performance of the shoe. I think that there are once again little things that Under Armour could do to improve on the shoe, especially if they're going to list this model for $150 USD. If you have additional questions on the Project Rock 5, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.